You're listening to Cinepunkt. This episode, Ghostwatching. Hello and welcome to Cinepunkt. I'm your host, Robert JE Simpson. For as long as the screen has been around, filmmakers have been using it to shock people. The trains in the Lumiere brothers films had people fearing for their lives. The emotional responses the screen induces in its transfixed audiences are powerful. But what if that energy was redirected to fuel something less friendly? That's the essence behind the legendary broadcast on Halloween night in 1992 of the BBC Screen on One drama Ghostwatch. Directed by Leslie Manning and scripted by Stephen Volk, the film would become the 90s equivalent to Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast. On today's show, we're going to revisit the phenomenon. Joining me for this episode, as per usual, is our very own Ben Simpson. Say hi, Ben.
Hello.
Who's himself a Ghostwatch virgin.
Yes.
And speaking of virgins, I'm delighted to have on hand my dear friend, writer, and my former co-editor back when we used to run a certain horror magazine, David L. Rattigan.
Hello.
He wasn't expecting to be referred to as a virgin tonight.
Well, I'm saying nothing.
I'm doing you a favour, David. You'll have be inundated with fans now. So in case you're wondering, look, Rachel hasn't been kicked out of the group. We're recording this in October 2020 and Rachel's currently on leave after giving birth to her daughter. So it's okay, Ben. We can say whatever we want. You know that she's never going to watch this back.
Yes.
And like, I've been looking for an excuse to get David on the show for a long time. Somehow in the course of the last week I've managed to coax him into two different things for us. So welcome to the club, David. I think when you do your second appearance that actually makes you officially one of our Cinepunkt family, so you're now one of us.
Brilliant, and thank you for engineering Rachel's pregnancy. It's worked out. I mean,
I had no hand
I
in
didn't
that.
quite mean to imply what I just implied, but yeah, you can always edit that.
Just for the record, I had no hand whatsoever in Rachel's pregnancy. That was between her and her husband, and nothing to do with me. Mr. Rattigan. Okay, so Ghostwatch 1992. This is something of a phenomenon. It's pretty fair to say, and we each have come at it from a slightly different perspective. So I kind of am intrigued to see, I guess, what our responses are, what our emotional kind of connections are to it. Now, for me, I watched it go out on air on Halloween night in 1992. I was all of 11 years old, and I remember sitting with the family, possibly even with Ben. I don't know. I mean, he would have been very, very young at the time, so possibly in bed by that stage.
Well, I would have been 4,
92.
so I probably would have been in bed.
I would imagine so, but you never know. But I do recall watching it, and I do recall being caught up in the whole premise of it entirely. You know, believed what was going on. I mean, because this is the thing. So for anyone who's not aware of Ghostwatch essentially sets itself up as an investigation into a haunted house, and the whole film is presented like a live TV broadcast, and it uses very familiar faces from British television at the time, and that was where the problem really started for it, because people kind of bought into that a little too readily. So I remember watching it in 92. I have very fond memories of it. I've come back to it numerous times since, and even watching it again yesterday. I mean, for me, it has lost none of its power. It is still a really powerful piece of drama, and I still, even though I know exactly what's going to happen, there's still points where I kind of don't realise, and there's bits that I'm still picking up on. David, Ben's a complete newbie, so I want to come to him in a second, because I feel we might get some more positive stuff before we go to Ben. Ben is often our voice of cynicism. What about you, David? What's your experience with Ghostwatch? Where do you come to with it?
Well, I'm feeling very old now, because you were 11, and Ben even younger. I would have been 14, I think, so a bit older. And I didn't actually watch it at the time. I was, from the age of about 7, several years earlier, I was really into gothic horror. But the older I got, and the more I got involved in church through my mother, the more I was dissuaded against those kinds of things. not so much the gothic horror. That wasn't quite as bad because it's got a bit more of a traditional edge. But anything contemporary to do with the occult and stuff like that, gradually around that time, I was being taught, and I was in contact with the local Pentecostal church, and I was reading books and stuff that sort of warned that things like this were gateways into the occult. So I would have been very wary of that kind of thing at the time. So I remember the sensation about it, and I remember thinking, well, it's hardly surprising that it had this awful effect on people because Satan's ways are evil. But I do remember the excitement around it, and then I didn't actually watch it until many years later when I'd sort of gotten over my teenage Pentecostalism, and I finally watched it in probably about 2013, 2014, so about 20 years after it was made, and of course I loved it. I think it still holds up very well. I think there's a few bits that haven't worn so well, but we can get onto that in the course of the conversation. But yeah, I think it's a wonderful piece of television, and I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to hear what baby Ben, being so much younger than both of us, thinks of it. So how did you find it then?
Right.
Oh, right. I mean, am I going to have to disown you now, or do I give you half an hour?
Right. It has good points and it has bad points. Some of the bad points were the terrible acting. Because, as you've said, it's old, but you can tell it's of a particular time. And the acting to me just seemed a little bit forced in some places, especially with the mother, and then the doctor as well. She annoyed me.
I was going to say something then, but it could be taken as misogynistic.
Yeah.
But because she annoyed me.
Just some I don't know, just her acting or whatever. It just, I don't know. It just didn't seem to sit well with me. Some of the camera tricks and all that they did was quite interesting. Like the way they got the figure to show up in the curtain, and then there's one shot in the bedroom when the two kids are there. Something happens. They go in, they get the two kids down the stairs, and then the camera guy's left there, and he pans across the room, and you see the figure, and it zooms in a bit, and then he goes back to where it was, and then the figure's not there. I thought that was quite clever. And then some of the stuff at the end, with things falling off the wall and cups exploding in the studio, and the creepy glory hole. Like, why call it a glory hole?
Well, I've got a story about that, because my childhood church was a Methodist church, and it had this kind of like basement underneath the organ,
right?
And they would call it the glory hole, and a glory hole being an old-fashioned term for somewhere you just, like a sort of basement or den where you just store stuff,
right?
Like a little rec room or whatever. But I'd never heard this term before, and a glory hole suggested to me, I imagined this stairwell full of like angels flapping about majestically. And you can imagine when I finally discovered what this glory hole was, the Methodist glory hole, that is, how disappointed I was. In later life, when I found out what an actual glory hole was, that was more exciting. But let's not go there. But there was a childhood glory hole in my church. That doesn't sound,
of all the admissions to me,
too bad.
So you like you've issues with some of the staging, some of the acting.
Yes. Oh, especially your man. Was it Craig or whatever you call him?
Craig Charles?
No,
from Red Dwarf.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just find him an obnoxious prick. Like he's good in Red Dwarf, but see that it's just like, look at me, You know.
Well, look, I'm sorry if I'm being insensitive, but it is my brief. They said, Craig, come along, be insensitive. Can you just get out the way a minute? You're in the middle of my close-up. They were in on it. Give me an app.
See, what I'm interested in is one thing I love about Ghostwatch is for the nostalgic value, it is the non-actors in it, the presenters, Craig Charles, Michael Parkinson, Mike Smith, not so much Sarah Green, because Sarah Green did look like she was acting a lot to me, which was a bit annoying.
Which one's that?
But Sarah Green was one in the house,
right, okay.
the lady in the house. She was married to the late Mike Smith, who was in the studio doing the phones. Right, yeah. But all the presenters to me, including the annoying Craig Charles, they were very much doing exactly what you'd have seen at that period on TV. If you'd switched on for one of these shows, like, for example, it was very Crime Watch, but I mean, they still do that, don't they? I don't know if it still takes the same format. They
still do. I mean, like, in terms of a set, it definitely has that kind of Crime Watchy vibe to it. I mean, the aesthetics, I think the thing that I suppose is harder to appreciate, nearly 30 years later, is just, as David says, like, how of the time it was, not just in terms of the fact this is old and it's of a period, it's like the production values look like what you would have got from a live broadcast. Sarah Green, actually, while she comes across as ever so slightly stagey sometimes, I mean, she's a competent actress anyway, but her persona isn't that different from what she would be doing on Going Live at that time.
Actually, Smithy was there when I had my encounter with what I think was a ghost, but he wasn't quite as struck as me, though, were you?
Well, yes. I mean, I think this is the right environment to study these things.
Yeah, that's why I get sent out here to the front line, and you stay all cosy and safe and sound in the studio, isn't it? Well, good luck, and I'll see you later.
Early Saturday morning television program. There's a kind of slight stiltedness in terms of a presenter, and Craig Charles plays up to a certain character that Craig Charles has as an on-screen kind of role. Like, for me, that I think that's why the 11-year-old me watching that bought into it completely, because I don't know if you've watched, if you've heard the actual trailer, basically the announcement that goes out before the program, but they don't really announce it as a drama. I'm going to play it.
Now, on BBC One, Screen One presents an unusual and sometimes disturbing film marking Halloween. Over the centuries, there have been countless reports of ghosts and ghouls, but the line between fact and fiction has always been unclear. Using the modern idiom of the outside broadcast, Michael Parkinson, Sarah Green, Mike Smith and Craig Charles star in Ghostwatch.
I mean, that's what they stuck on immediately before the programme goes to air. And even though this is going out in the Screen on One strand, which was a drama strand that the BBC had at the time, that's all the announcement that you have before the programme. And there's nothing that goes on during the programme. There's nothing in that actually explicitly says this is a drama. The way that it's worded is such, because I've now played that back several times, it does say the line between fiction and sort of, drama and reality is a little bit blurred, but it doesn't say this is it. And they say they star, but like there's nothing really, like, you could easily forget that over the course of like the opening few minutes, because it is presented like a broadcast from the time.
Doesn't the title sequence make it quite clear?
In that it has...
I thought that. Well, in that it's kind of like, I can't remember exactly what it says, but Ghostwatch, written by blah blah. It's a standard drama opening.
But I think there is that, whilst it has that, and I know this was part of the argument that the BBC made and the production team made way back in '92 whenever they got all their complaints about it. The reality is that you have that for a minute, right? So you got a minute at the start of the show, but then once you get into it, once you present it with your characters, and there's a lot of information and there's a lot of kind of stuff that goes on in those opening kind of 5 minutes introducing the setup, and the setup does feel like, you're watching a live broadcast. I mean, if you remember watching the likes of The Big Breakfast when they did an outside broadcast, like, it's that kind of pandemonium, and there's that chaos, and there's all the lights, and there's things that are not quite right, and there's a bit of sketchy kind of delivery. I think you just forget. Like, that's the thing. I think, and even watching it now, there's a part of me that forgets, and forgets the fact that this is a drama that wasn't dramaed live. They recorded all the location stuff weeks before they got around to doing the stuff in the studio. But when you watch it, you do kind of get this impression that it's all going out as a live broadcast. And I think if you miss that start, you know what it's like at the start of a thing. You're sitting there talking away. You're kind of having a chat. You're getting your cup of tea ready. You're getting your popcorn out to eat. You could miss all that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was very much the way the presenters did it was very true to the time, and like you mentioned the Big Breakfast, and that was exactly what the Big Breakfast was like. You'd have this. I don't think it was Craig Charles, but it was someone very like him. Would literally be at 8 o'clock in the morning, running around from house to house, saying, "And now we're going to meet such and such neighbour, and now we're going to run down the street."
It was Keith Chegwin, wasn't it?
That's right, Keith Chegwin, and I think there were a couple of people. And it really was. It was all over the place. It was, had that really pretty shittily improvised feel that I think anyone young and modern. You're our young and modern person tonight, Ben. And anyone watching it today would think, well, that's contrived. But actually, for the time, virtually none of it feels contrived to me of what the presenters do. The actual actors, the character of the main researcher. I don't like the character, and I don't like the actor. I think maybe it was just the style of acting of the time, but it just doesn't. You get that feeling that she's just not real. And then the smarmy American guy just comes off as phony.
Yeah.
And then the family themselves are just very artificial. So I don't think, certainly watching it today, I would never be in danger of thinking it was real, because as soon as the actual actors come into it, you just think, no, that's not real.
Some of the phone calls as well were a bit bizarre. Like, I know it's hard to act on the phone, but
the guy with his pickle sandwich.
Yeah.
You ain't gonna believe this, I'm telling you.
Well, you try us, Gavin.
Well, my mates were round to watch the videos, and we put on the programmes about 10 minutes ago. I had this sandwich, a cheese and pickle sandwich it was.
Oh, yes.
And, it frightened me to bugger it did.
I think actually the phone calls got better as it went on, because there's a point where you start to hear proper distortion on the telephone line as well. And, for me, it just sold the effect a little bit more. The weird thing about those TV broadcasts was the way that they would do it. And again, that was a very typical thing that you had on a live show. Was they had their phones that they're made to pick up, but everything. It's a bit like doing one of these things, Ben. It's like all the sound got broadcast into the studio room. Like the phones were redundant; they were there as a prop.
Yeah,
and it just seems so kind of odd. And then you've obviously got Parky, is sitting there kind of controlling things, and obviously you're kind of, if you watch enough TV, you're kind of aware about the logic of this. Is that whilst he's doing this, he's also got someone talking in his ear who'll be giving him other instructions then that nobody else is privy to.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating kind of multi-layered study also of a production process, which for me is part of the appeal. I mean, Michael Parkinson is what sells this, really, because Michael Parkinson is famously the UK's best sort of interviewer. That's his line. He's a very he's got a gravitas and a sincerity, and he's someone you would rely upon. I mean, he's a Yorkshire man, so it's a nice, stable, reliable man who's not going to try and con you. And I think that's the other reason that people went along with it, because Parky isn't an actor. When you see Michael Parkinson on screen there delivering this, and I mean, he does a fairly good job of being cynical and questioning and kind of actually seeming genuine.
She can't do it.
No, even under hypnosis we tried that.
Really,
Still.
the same result. What other evidence do we have, Doctor?
Well, over the months, Alan Domesky, my partner, and I heard numerous noises, thuds, bangs, scratching in the walls, knocking.
The sort of normal noises you associate with poltergeist activity. What about this here, though?
I don't know. I think that's, for me, is what probably sold at the time, and it's what sells it to me now, watching back. He's still the strongest thing in it.
He is, absolutely. I think he's the absolute star of the show. And I don't think I'd enjoy it nearly as much, if not for him, just because he's such a, I want to say charismatic presence, but he doesn't, on the surface, he doesn't, you don't think of him as, he's just an ordinary sort of Yorkshireman, as you mentioned. But actually there is something very commanding about his presence, and very sort of authoritative, and, he comes across as trustworthy and such, and he's a very comfortable personality that you settle in with. And as you say, he does the role of the skeptic, questioning this really irritating researcher, who I have to say sounds like the very worst naive sort of ghost hunter type, or psychic type or whatever, that really rattles me, because she doesn't seem to have an ounce of skepticism in her body. She really annoyed me. Yeah, can you tell?
just a little.
I would agree with you there, definitely.
Paramisogynist, that's what it is.
I just wonder if, I'm a bit of a hypocrite, because as Robert knows, even though I'm not obviously I've alluded to my Pentecostal past, and while I'm not a sort of fundamentalist conservative or evangelical anymore, I am quite a committed sort of Anglican, Anglo-Catholic type. So I am a bit of a hypocrite because I am a person of faith. But I am very cynical, very skeptical about sort of all sorts of, ghost hunting and psychic sort of things. And I wondered if either of you two come at it from a viewpoint of sort of sympathy with that whole genre of actual paranormal investigators and ghost hunters and all that.
I did wonder if somehow we get onto this. So, this is the before even getting into maybe quite the nuances of that. One of the things that I think is worth kind of drawing out is the influence that this had on that whole paranormal genre of television. Ben's a bit different. Ben grew up in the era of Most Haunted. There was not a show that existed before this.
No.
But it's one that I think only exists because of this. First,
is there actually a traceable connection?
I think so. I think
that, because it wouldn't surprise me if there was, because it's almost as if someone saw that show and thought, right, let's make an actual documentary.
It definitely it's definitely been cited as one of the influences, I think, on it. And The Most Haunted as well. It's also a fictional show. Let's be honest about it. So it was started broadcast in 2002. So you're talking a whole 10 years after. Although interestingly, basically after this went out on air, the BBC banned it from being broadcast again for 10 years. So 2002 would have been the 10th anniversary of Ghostwatch. That I'm sure, in the production meetings was playing around in their heads. But also you have a kids TV presenter who's taking the reins of the host. Sarah Green was known as a kids TV presenter. Yvette Fielding was an ex-Blue Peter presenter. There is a kind of definite appeal, I think, to different age groups. But also, I think that's a deliberate connection. And again, it's a husband and wife team involved in both things. Mike Smith and Sarah Green were a real life couple. And Yvette Fielding kind of has her hubby in as well. But yeah, there is a connection. I just don't know enough about the ins and outs.
Who's her hubby? I didn't realise that.
Yvette's?
Yeah. She's not married to Derek Acora.
No, Carl Beating is her husband.
Oh, right. I don't know.
So yeah. Apparently
so I'm so, even though I love Ghostwatch,
yeah,
I just have no desire to watch Most Haunted at all.
There's a Most
Haunted because even though it's clearly just as fake in many ways.
They did a Most Haunted in one of your favorite film locations. They did a night. They did a night in the Alhambra in Morecambe.
Oh really?
Yeah. So
and. Did they find anything?
I haven't actually watched it yet. I keep meaning to and give it a go. Sorry, Ben, we've completely distracted here. So, you're of the Most Haunted generation. Can you see a connection between the two? Is there some?
Oh yeah, I can see correlations between the two. Obviously, they don't. The Most Haunted thing tend to not really, from memory, go into actual people's houses. It's normally like this was a school at one point, or this used to be some old, I don't know, linen mill or whatever, and
bigger spaces, basically.
Far bigger spaces. Lots of shadows, and then they have the night vision camera, a bit not quite as sophisticated as the thermal vision in Ghostwatch. But yeah, you can see similarities, headed by a female, and then they've got the twat of a medium in. Sam and his little friend,
Derek Okora was a saint.
Derek Okora was a cunt.
I second that.
But yeah, like most, like I used to watch most Haunted with my mum a lot. Mum was big into it. Don't know why. I think I don't know. She just must have had a wee wanting to believe. Like I would like to believe in ghosts and stuff like that, but sadly, like I don't know if it's a mind thing or your brain playing tricks on you. Like I have, whenever I was younger, I'd seen things, but I don't know if that was just my overactive imagination whenever I was younger. I would like to, and I would like there to be tangible evidence, but like most Haunted, I never really believed in any of the supposed ghosties they found.
But you've done things like you've been on ghost
hunts.
Oh
yeah, I've been on ghost hunts and ghost tours and stuff like that. That's me. I want to believe, but I don't.
I just kind of wonder: is there? I mean, so this is a thing that I think we've obviously been aware about ghosts and the implications for that. I think about something like the Stone Tape, the Nigel Neal BBC drama from I think it's 1972, where it's all about the ghosts like literally being recorded within the infrastructure of the buildings. I mean, Nigel Neal's stuff is sort of fascinating about this. So, I mean, our idea about our obsession with ghosts has always been there. But I think in the most haunted era, obviously there's a lot more kind of pushing towards it. The rise of, I mean, well, actually, Ghostbusters, I think, is what, 1984? So, I mean, like, ghosts have always been part of, and ghost hunting has been part of the popular culture as well. But there is something that's a bit more disturbing about this, and I wonder... I don't know. I just wonder if this fueled something afterwards in terms of our own interests. I think something just to kind of pick up on that you did say. I'm being a little bit incoherent there as I try to structure a thought. It's sort of trying to elude me like pipes. You did sort of draw on something that's very, very different from any other show, but which I think probably harkens back to the live TV broadcast of the time, which is that they don't go into houses in the likes of Most Haunted, generally speaking, because it's too small a space. I mean, you see there's actually very little room for them to move around. You've got all these fucking camera wires going up and down stairs.
I think that's why some of the tricks that they've played in that are sold to you so well, like pictures falling off the wall, and then like the apples that they were bobbing and the string, flying across the room like that. And even how they managed to get that sort of ethereal looking figure in some of them shots. Like, I couldn't see a cut. I haven't went frame by frame, but especially that one with your man in the bedroom. And the lights are on. I don't know if anybody else seen it. Did you see it?
Which bedroom scene's this now?
Is this the one right at the beginning?
No, not that one, because that's the one at the curtain in the back, and the room's all black, and like you don't see anything, and then you do see something. So
and then you don't again, and then you do because they're playing with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I know the scene you're referring to. It's quite late on, isn't it?
Yeah.
When the camera's sort of moving around willy nilly.
Yeah, it's like they grab the girls and they take it out, and the camera swoops around, and then as it's swooping, you see the figure, and then it stops and it zooms in for something, and then it comes back across the room, and it's not there. Like, I couldn't see any cuts, so like all that's really, really impressive. I don't know if that's maybe a I don't know post-production kind of thing that they've done to it, but for such a small space, like, it does kind of sell some of the tricks. But then some of them are a bit naff too.
But I mean, for me, I think that's one of the appeals of Pipes as a character. I think, like, for many years, I think I even just thought that Pipes wasn't a character as such, that wasn't somebody that you saw on screen. But you watch it back now, and it's very clear that he's peppered throughout the whole thing. It's, you know, he's always just there whenever you're not completely aware that you're seeing him. And I mean, I had to go back a couple of times yesterday and go, did I just see that? And then you kind of frame him back to see, no, I did. Okay, that wasn't.
Well, apparently they still seem to be debating over his appearances even now. I think I read something yesterday on the internet, the ever trustworthy internet, that while there's been like, I'd say 11 sightings identified, but then a potential further 2 or something, and no one can quite agree on how many sightings. And of course, if you're a fan of this and you watch it over a few times, you do end up going back and thinking, did I see him then? Did I not? Was that tiny blob that just appeared in the corner of the screen? Was that Pipes? I even shocked myself a couple times because, there's that picture of the 2 schoolgirls on the back wall of the studio.
Yes.
And a couple times when you catch that in the background, it kind of looks like Pipes' black dress.
Isn't there a shot, though, of Pipes in the studio?
There is, when the lights go down.
Because I think it's with the expert, isn't it? And it's just over her shoulder.
Just behind her, yeah.
I didn't rewind back that one. I was just kind of happy in my head. It's like, I was watching the rest of the set to see if I'd seen something else reflected in the set.
No.
It's like, no. There's nothing else there. That has to have been someone, and they just put just off shot.
Did you see whatever it was under the stairs? Did you see that?
There is something that you see briefly.
It's almost like, well, to me it looked like the Grudge. Like it looked like a little girl with black hair, which could have been one of the girls, but they just pried open the door. It's before your man gets hit in the back of the head with the mirror and near decapitates him. There's a wee, the camera goes past and you see something. It's like, ooh, that's creepy.
This is one of the things I love, though. I mean, because I've seen this a number of times, but I don't really want to go back and kind of unpick every sighting. I'm quite happy to watch it and be surprised every time because, and I think this is part of why it literally still sent a shiver up my spine, and it's not a lot of stuff that does that first time round, let alone after you've seen it a dozen times. But it's because that stuff is so fleeting, it's so well placed. I mean, Pipes as a character is done so effectively. And yes, it's all very, very clearly signposted exactly what's happening and what's going on and what he is and what it is that we should be looking out for. But there is still an economy of that presentation. I think that just makes it work. It's less is more, because we talk about him and because we're kind of thrown away with the idea that the kids have set it up to begin with. As a villain, as a monster, as a scare, it's so much more effective.
Are there particular moments that you think are particularly effective? Because as you were talking about that, my mind was going back to 1 or 2 moments that I thought were particularly effective, and I did genuinely get sort of goosebumps just thinking back to them. And I don't know if you, Ben, had any of those moments since you were.
Yeah, I had a couple. As I say, I liked whenever they first brought up the figure thing, I was like, oh right, okay, I didn't see anybody, and then they replay it, and it's like, ooh, that's spooky. And then I find the other one where in the bedroom, the other shot in the bedroom where you see the figure and then it disappears, when all the lights are on. And then the first opening of the glory hole, like that was a wee bit creepy because, well, I don't know if I did see something or not. I possibly didn't, but I thought I saw something in there. Thought that was creepy. And then the voice bit, when she gets what do you call that? Possessed, yeah. Thought that was quite cool.
Oh. Kimmy, Kim, could you do something? Susie. Stop it! Stop it, Susie!
You know, whenever she's actually talking, and then the mother's
Yeah.
there, she's going, stop it, stop it. But yeah, I thought that was,
You acted that exactly as well as the mother.
yeah.
So harsh.
Yeah.
But no, that's actually that's one of the moments actually that I find genuinely chilling, which feels almost like a cliche when you describe it. You know, the girl talking in the ghost's voice or whatever. But actually, when that happens in the film, it's genuinely a kind of a holy shit moment.
And at the end.
And yeah, that would be
in the studio.
the other. Yeah, the other really chilling moment for me is when, I mean, obviously it's all a bit over the top at first, but then when it starts to go quiet towards the end, and it's just Michael Parkinson on his own, and you get that sort of wind coming, and then the camera work becomes sort of indistinct, and then he starts walking towards the camera, and yeah, so I'm getting chills thinking of it.
Somebody can get the link back. When you assure me that my wife is safe,
we have got an emergency generator. Whether or not we can bring it in,
I'm not going.
So that's very effective, and it's very Nigel Neal as well. It reminds me of the end of Quatermass in the Pit.
Yeah,
when Andrew Keir's walking around the streets as Quatermass, and just, you know, there's all this wind just coming out of nowhere, and very effective.
It's quite apocalyptic in its own way, and it is disturbing, and I think there is something about the claustrophobia of the whole thing that for me works quite effectively. You know, because there's not a lot of space to go, and even when they go outside the house, it feels like essentially they're trapped. You know, because of the limited lighting as well, everything's just very narrowly lit. They're all down these very, very clear corridors to get from A to B. You know, they're all contained within these very small studios, and then you have this ominous presence that, a bit like Elsa behind me today, you know, she's just kind of like loitering there, just about visible, and you kind of, I mean, there's got to be some pipe stuff out in the streets as well that I haven't even noticed. I'd be surprised if there wasn't.
Yeah, there is apparently.
There is. Okay, I know that. I think I remember reading about one of the debates about it. But yeah, it's such a, I don't know. For me, it's such a powerful piece. And I completely agree. Some of the actors are the weakest thing in it, and they are the things that take us back out of that reality that otherwise this very, very adequately, you know, sort of sells to us. In fact, watching it back now, the one that was lost on me in 1992, but I pick up on now every time, is there's the guy that they chat to. I think it's Craig Charles chats to him at the park, and they walk down from the park.
The medium.
Towards the house. He tells, he's in Doctor Who. He's in Spearhead from Space, the first John Pertwee story. And like I see him now, and all I can see is the actor. I can't see anything else. And it's just like, okay, right, I'm taken out of this again now. And then he goes, and I can get myself back in. And hopefully kind of just sort of run along with it for a bit.
It's interesting they don't make more of that character, because that must have been a temptation, just because, you know, I mean, you think back to like Poltergeist or something, where the medium is the main character. It must, or one of the main characters, you know, these huge prolonged scenes, and she is the best thing about it. But you must have thought there would be a temptation for the scriptwriter to throw a medium in there and have him or her as a big character. But actually, the guy that you're referring to, who I didn't recognize because I'm not a Whovian, as they say, I didn't recognize the actor or anything. But he was actually kind of your bog standard sort of sits in a spiritualist church hall, slightly elderly, boring medium. You know, there was nothing. You know, there was nothing spooky about him.
He's a medium
character. It was the very definition of medium. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, this originally was conceived as a 5-part drama by Stephen Volk. In fact, he's actually been really good this week. It's October 2020, and this week he's put up on the Ghostwatch Behind the Curtains blog his original outline, along with his own comments about it. So you can actually if anyone who's really into this can go back and discover a lot more about the history and the development of the characters and stuff. But obviously, I mean, as a 5-hour drama, it's a very, very different thing, because it was much more in a traditional sense that, okay, here's a character who's coming in to do this investigation. And then they were going to broadcast that they were supposed to be doing an investigation for TV, gets broadcast. And then when people watch the broadcast, they notice that they started seeing things in the broadcast that weren't originally picked up on, which prompts them to do a whole other investigation into it. And I mean, that's familiar to an extent from what we get, but the difference is that it was a drama that played out very, very clearly as a drama. The difference between that and what we get on screen is that what we get on screen, every single aspect of that is presented to us as if it's happening, as if it's live, as if it's unscripted, as if we are literally fly on the wall. And I think that's the thing, is that voyeuristic thing, which in 2020 is something we're far more used to. You know, when we think about CCTV, when we think about the ability of little pocket cameras, you know, that we can wander around with. We all carry one on our mobile phones, for goodness sake. Yeah. I mean, we're in a very, very different world. Our accessibility is very, very different to how it was in 92. But there is something about that, about, you know, whenever you feel you're literally, like, I mean, Ben, you're a live streamer. You know, you're literally watching something happen on screen or something not happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, that I suppose is one of the other joys of this, is that there are moments where there seems to be nothing happening. You're like, what's going on then? Okay, we're going to do it. And, do you know what it was? There's a point in the show as well. I can't remember what the night's actual TV listings were like. But when, it must be just, they must hit like 10 o'clock or something in what would have been real time. And Michael Parkinson announced that they're actually going to stay with this broadcast because everything's got a bit too crazy.
I should tell you, if you joined to see the next programme, that in fact we're staying with what we have here from Foxhill Drive, because the events are so remarkable and dramatic that we'll be staying with them for as long as we have.
And they're going to delay whatever else was coming on. And that's the sort of announcement that you occasionally got on TV. And again, you know, whatever else I'm feeling at that point, I'm suddenly going, oh, right, okay, I've forgotten what's on next. This is clearly it. And you kind of literally feel you're part of it.
Although then there is that moment shortly after that where suddenly they're back in the living room, ostensibly back in the living room, sort of playing card games or something and drinking pop. And you're kind of like, why are they still sticking with it? Clearly, it's all back to normal now. Sure, they should be moving on to the 10 o'clock news.
I mean, Parky just seems, he's such a consummate professional. He's just happy to accept anything that's stuck in front of him. Give him an auto cue, he'll read it. Give him something on a screen, and he's happy to believe that is what's happening.
Anchorman.
Exactly, Ben, Anchorman.
I wonder if people found anything unintentionally funny, because I didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing again before. Like, I watched it the other day, and then I was going to watch it all again today, so it was fresh in my memory. I didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing, but I watched a few bits, and I actually found unintentionally funny was the scene, you know, where they catch the girl hammering on the pipe to make the sound. Yeah. And just before that, they're like, can we have the upstairs camera? No, not that camera. That camera. No, the landing camera. No, not that landing camera. That landing. I was in hysterics. I don't know if it was supposed to be funny, because presumably the tension should be building at that point. But I was just I just found it very funny. I mean, I guess that's, you know, live TV for you. Yeah. Supposedly live TV. But I wonder, given that, you know, some of the acting was a bit appalling in places, or at least old-fashioned by our standards today, was there anything that either of you found unintentionally funny?
Ben, I feel you should answer this one, not me.
I didn't really laugh. At all. Like, that bit was mildly amusing. It was just like, but I was just kind of, you know, because I was watching this for the first time ever, I was just going with it. It was like, what's going on here? You know, trying to follow. Thinking back to it, it is. That's kind of like that is funny. I don't know. Probably the little girl's terrible drawing of pipes. It's like, here, you can keep that. It's a present. It's like, oh, Thanks.
Us casting the runes, that's where you literally get past the runes and it's now going to affect you.
Maybe
It's
we'll
M.R.
put it up
James.
somewhere for everyone to see it. Where's a good place? The fridge? Okay, the fridge.
Let's put it back where it was originally.
Yeah.
It's just, we don't want to touch that.
Put
thing.
it
The
back
fridge
in
is
the drawer. Maybe set fire to. I don't know.
We're getting an insight into what Ben does with his kids now. It's
Yeah.
like, yep, on the fridge.
Yeah. Oh, I have
Look at
some
there.
of my children's artwork up in front of me. So
You do, yeah.
yeah, that part was mildly amusing for me, but that's, I have kids, so it was just like you could see her face. It's like, hey, thank you. Oh, it's great. That's a wonderful drawing.
See, I actually thought the little kid was pretty good. I mean, I'm not really, I was happy enough because there's always a slight stiltedness about kids anyway.
Yeah. I'm not saying like she was terrible. I'm saying the whole reaction to the drawing type thing. It was just amusing to me because I have two kids and they do stuff like that.
See, I'm not a parent, so if a kid gives me a drawing, I just say, "Oh, shit."
Yeah.
Like you're obviously trained.
See, as a parent, you have to not do that because you'll wreck their little hearts.
Yeah, see, this is my problem. They grew up with a complex.
Yeah,
never stopped our mum
I'll
and
be
dad.
brutally honest.
I don't think I got told by my mum and dad that was shit. I got encouraged. Maybe you got.
Like, I still can't get him to say that was good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like that once in a while. Don't even tell me it's shit. Just tell me once in a while something's good. We'll do that therapy another session. I mean,
I will just say, Robert. I mean, you clearly, by putting Elsa in the background there, you're clearly looking for validation from us too. So, Elsa is looking very good.
Top notch.
That's genuinely quite
Thank
good.
you. It's lost.
And the little doodles that Ben's kids did on the wall in the background, little superhero type.
Yeah,
very
very talented for kids of that age.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's not their drawings.
This is the bit I got to cut out of the audio version of this. It's like, we've nothing to look at. Also, what? Ilsa? Yeah, he's a big fan of Frozen now. Which I kind of am, but that's neither here nor there. So as somebody who's new to this, Ben, who's never seen this before, who maybe doesn't have the same sort of sense of expectation, I mean, David and I will probably both been told this is an excellent piece of drama and it's something we have to watch. It's something that is kind of horror experts. I'm going to call us that for a change, David, because we really should accept that title. It's something that you're told this is a great piece of horror storytelling. It's a great piece of storytelling. It's a great piece of TV drama.
Yeah.
So we're predisposed in a certain sense. But for you, I mean, did it work? Did it not work? Is this something you would go back to? Do you see what the fuss is about it? Do you understand what happened? I mean, I don't even know if you know about the bigger picture about this.
No, I have no idea what the ramifications of this broadcast were to the mass public. Watching it, having not known, like, I know nothing of this this drama. I think watching it, I was under I don't know, I didn't even have any kind of notion what maybe this thing was going to be about because I've never seen it, never heard anything about it. So while watching it, I was like, oh, it's some bad acting, I could kind of tell like it was fake, and then some of it got a little bit bizarre and people started showing up and talking, like the doctors and stuff like that. And that twat Craig, I was just like, this isn't really selling it to me. And later on, I suppose you just got to give it a little bit of a chance to get, because it was kind of slow, slow to start, and then, sort of more halfway through, sort of the last sort of, maybe 20 minutes or so of it. Well, that's where all the good stuff happens, And there's a couple of wee chilly moments, like, pictures falling off the wall and things swinging and random cat noises, which I didn't really get the whole meaning behind. And
the cats now, I think this is the thing that I found the weakest was the cat noises.
It's like, yeah.
Wasn't there something in the backstory?
Well, yeah, it's there, and I like the idea of it, but just felt for me watching it, the execution didn't quite work, and also I think it may just be from having worked with Ben and Soundman for a while. Like, you're aware that apart from anything else, whenever your mic's going around the room, as you get closer to something, it'll get louder rather than it being at the same volume throughout.
Yeah.
Cats. It's like cats. Can you hear it?
Where, Pam?
It's all right. It's all around us. Like the trap somewhere. Do you hear it? Cats running around up there in the ceiling.
Can you hear anything,
Yes.
Sarah?
Yeah, I can hear it now. She's right.
Mum. What is it, Kimmy?
I think a kind of a minor re-edit might clean up that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that might be a bit, maybe a bit better. But the cats, I just thought was a little bit too cliche, a little bit too hokey.
There is one real cat in it, but
yeah, which is quite an effective jump scare too.
Yeah,
because I've seen this a dozen times, and I watched it again yesterday, expecting to find the cat in the cupboard, and the cat's not in the cupboard.
No.
I mean, there's no point at which we see a cat in the cupboard.
But there is something in the cupboard.
Yeah, but we never actually get to see it, and this is again one of those things. Like, I'm still amazed that after having watched this so many times, my expectations are still such that. I mean, maybe that's the thing, is I'm expecting the shock to go along a very, very tried and tested manner, which is, okay, we're leading you up to this thing, we're going to take you here, and what you're going to get is a little scare that actually is not a scare. We're going to mislead you for a bit, and I'm expecting her to open up the cupboard door, and there's like, meow, and it's like, oh, it's not a ghost, it's just a bloody cat.
Yeah.
And that's not what happens. And I know it's not what happens, but that's what I wanted to happen, what I expected to happen, which I find bizarre. I just want to touch on what actually happened with this, because anyone who's listening to this podcast maybe isn't aware, and Ben's not aware, and David is aware, and I'm aware. You're aware what happened, aren't you, David?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So this actually at the time was the most complained about BBC broadcast thing ever. There's over 30,000 calls they took complaining about this, and this is something that we're probably very, very aware of today. Anytime somebody says something, the newspapers then fuel a whole campaign of writing letters of complaint. But it was a phenomenal number of calls, most of them complaining about the content.
And there was one very young caller, a 4-year-old from the Belfast area, complaining that the acting was just terrible. Sorry, I interrupted you. Feel free to edit that bit out.
Well, I'm keeping that in. But I'm going to follow it up with, there was an 18-year-old who committed suicide within the week.
Yeah, that was the...
Is a factory worker called Martin Denham. He had learning difficulties, had a mental age apparently about 13. And the suggestion, although it was never adequately kind of linked, was that watching this had put him into a certain frame of mind. Apparently the family home had a faulty central heating system, so their pipes would also knock. And what was it? According to this, his suicide note says, "If there are ghosts, I will be with you always as a ghost." But apparently his parents said that he's basically obsessed by the program. So there were things like that. There were concerns that there were a lot of kids who were sitting up watching this stuff because it was on after the 9 o'clock watershed. That wonderful moment where Michael Parkinson says, "Put your kids to bed." It's past the watershed. They shouldn't be here. But at the time, go ahead, David.
Sorry, I was going to say that was another bit I found very funny when I watched it back today.
Because we don't talk about the watershed anymore.
Was that? Well, it was the way he said that. The way he just, it's quite passive aggressive. The way he just decided to go and have a dig at this caller, and he said, "Well, in any case, you should really put your kids to bed by now." And I was trying to think whether that was actually the sort of thing back then that a presenter might have said in a call-in, or whether that was far-fetched even for the time. But it was very funny, nevertheless.
I mean, I have such recollections about the 9 o'clock watershed being a thing, and it was something that was referred to a lot. And I can't just be mum and dad saying, "Oh, you can't watch this because it's on past 9 o'clock," which I'm sure they probably also did. and there may well have been an argument about watching this back in the day. I cannot remember. But that was something that was part and parcel. It was that you knew you got more adult content once you reached 9 o'clock. And I think that it was something that, they would remind people, especially if there was something that was going to be slightly more risque than normal. They would remind you, that it's now past 9 o'clock. Here's some porn, basically. No, they didn't do that. Not back then. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the complaints were about its kind of reality, about how people felt that they were being duped. Also, people completely convinced that this was unleashing demons on them, basically. And the other added problem was, like, for the kids, again, having a kids TV presenter in the middle of this meant that people were maybe a little bit more inclined to let their kids up and watch it.
Did they not watch the credits at the end? No?
That's 90 minutes, though. I mean, you got that 90 minutes in between where you're completely, you're sort of ensconced in this. I mean, if you go to a cinema and a film works well for you, once the credits are done, you kind of should get yourself slowly into that film and become completely immersed by it to the point where you forget about everything else that's going on. And hopefully by that point, your popcorn eating has just become an automatic thing and you're no longer thinking about it. You're not looking down to make sure you got the right handle. You're just doing it. And you're watching this and you're almost hypnotized by what's happening on screen. And you forget about everything else around you until it reaches the end and you're taken out of it by credits. But the reality is, even the credits for this, I mean, yes, what are you going to credit? You got, if you're not paying attention properly, I mean, your main cast are all playing themselves.
Yeah, but then you can see
the guy
man
who's
on
playing
telephone, guy playing camera has a different name from what?
No. The guy playing camera uses his own name. The cameraman uses his own name.
But what about caller this and caller that? They're...
It's just enough that the average person doesn't read credits. The average person doesn't pay attention.
Written by...
I mean, also...
the average person was cowering in the corner. I think.
Listening for the central heating to go off.
Or running down the street going, the aliens are coming! The aliens are coming!
Well, I mean, look, this is the one thing I think before we go, I would like to just quickly touch on that as well. I said at the start, this was basically the 1990s equivalent of the Orson Welles War of the Worlds broadcast. I mean, am I wrong in saying that?
No, it was very, very much in that vein. And I think it was very easy to misconstrue what happened, because I remember...
You remember Orson Welles broadcast? David, you're older than I thought.
No. I obviously don't remember Orson Welles personally. I might just remember his, what was it, Fish Fingers adverts or whatever he did. Anyway, no, I do recall the sort of fuss in the media around Ghostwatch. And to me, I was thinking, all these people committing suicide, which of course was not what happened. One person killed themselves, and obviously an awful lot more people complained about it, but didn't go so far as to harm themselves. But see, I was already in a much more hysterical environment than your average member of the public. Just going back to my sort of fundamentalism, they were blaming Pentecostals and fundamentalists would blame horror films for just everything in those days. They just either just had, or possibly actually it was just before the Jamie Bulger murder in Liverpool, which obviously quite close to me, when they pinned it on Child's Play 3 and said that it was these kids had seen this horror film and it basically carried out with this real child this murder that they'd seen on the screen in this horror comedy. And I used to read these Christian magazines that would tell you how it was opening yourselves up to demons and inviting demons into your household by watching these films, or even listening to certain pop songs and things was a way for these demons to come in and start influencing you, and then you'd end up on drugs and harming yourself and all this kind of stuff. So horror films were sort of the number one thing to blame, and not just among evangelicals and Pentecostals. This was in society at large to some extent, because we were just a few years since the video nasties and all that, when everything was being banned, because if you watch these gory horror films you'd end up being violent yourself and all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
So it was a hysterical sort of environment that we were living in. So, but yeah, I certainly think the hysteria around Ghostwatch seems to me to have been quite parallel to certainly the myth of what we hear about Orson Welles and War of the Worlds and everything that went on there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I suppose part of the thing is we like to think we're so sophisticated and savvy now that we can spot the hoaxes happening. But, I mean, Inside Number 9, I don't know, Ben, if you've ever come across that.
No,
it's
never.
Okay, so it's a comedy horror show by Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton from the League of Gentlemen. It's been running for about 5, 6, 7 years now.
Mm.
And 2 Halloweens ago, they did a live special.
Right.
And there was a lot of buzz about this. I mean, the show is well loved. It's great drama. I mean, actually, I recommend you dig it out and try a few episodes of it. But there was a lot of excitement about this live episode because, like, those guys are brilliant. What they do is fantastic, and they really know how to use the form. But I rewatched it again today, and rewatching their live episode, I remember watching it and kind of being a little bit kind of perplexed and going along with it. And then there's the point where I realize they're doing a Ghostwatch. There's a point during that where I caught on the fact that this is what we're doing. We're now seeing the same thing. And actually, for a while, I have fallen for it just as much as people fell for Ghostwatch in 1992. Just as the same as people fell for War of the Worlds, even though War of the Worlds was announced as a drama. People still aren't paying attention enough. And I think that's the thing. I mean, this is why I said to you, look, I didn't want you just to stick it on the background and watch it. I wanted you to sit down and watch it, because if you don't watch it, you miss out on half the fun, really. It's much easier to be outside of that world for 90 minutes than when you're actually in and absorbed.
Mm.
But yeah, I think it changed things for me. I mean, I think it changed a lot of stuff in terms of horror, and for me, it's still very effective. So look, we're gonna wrap this up anyway because we've talked long enough, and we could probably talk more. So, in summary, what were your? Did you like? Did you not like? Would you watch again? Would you recommend? I'm gonna hear David first.
Oh, I'd absolutely recommend it. With the caveat that I guess maybe it's one of those things that if you weren't around at the time, if you don't remember that era, it's probably going to seem a bit more cornier to you and less believable. I mean, to me, it's still, largely because of some of the old-fashioned acting from the actual acting part of the cast as opposed to the presenters. It's not all entirely convincing, but I still find it endlessly entertaining. And I think it's one of those shows that I could put on at any time and be riveted. It's very entertaining.
Ben?
Yeah, it's worth at least one watch, because that's all I'm going to give it. Like, some good parts, some bad parts, bad acting. It gets good at the end, with the scares and the creepiness. But yeah, go watch it if you haven't watched it. But just watch it the once.
I wish.
Do I need to step in and do some mending of the brotherly relationship here?
It's
because
fine.
I feel there's things Robert wants to say now that he's holding in for the sake of keeping the family together. Really,
we don't always agree. It's absolutely fine.
Okay, it's fine.
Occasionally, Ben will show me something I'm going to go, "What the hell? What have I just done to my eyes?" So, I mean, like for me, I wish that people. I think the thing that's so frustrating is that this was something that really needed to be experienced as it went out on the night way back in 1982, and I wish that we could do that for people, that people could experience this for the first time in a world where all that language, all the aesthetics fitted. Now, yes, it does seem it's starting to date slightly more. It is very much of its era, although I think the drama for me is still top notch. I think that the execution is pretty good, and I think that its influence on other things in terms of what it's done with certain parts of found footage films in terms of what it's done with like Most Haunted, which itself was a phenomenon. I think we have picked up on bits and pieces, whether we realize it or not. But for me, it's still pretty effective, and I think that it is it's the non-acting cast that really make it work, because even today, watching back, there was something about those bits that seemed quite believable. Maybe it's just they read autocue better than anybody else, but they're completely convincing, and that's where I get sold, and I kind of overlook most of the rest of it. I think it's very effective. I think everyone, as Ben says, actually, I think everyone should watch it at least once. At least once. I mean, those who want to watch it more often, there's a national seance happens every Halloween, run by the Ghostwatch Behind the Curtains guys, and Stephen Volkenholt's interest as well. And at the time that it would have went out back in '92, they stick Ghostwatch on the TV, and everyone kind of watches it together, all channeling the power once again to kind of manifest pipes into the world and chat about it and all that sort of fun stuff too, which is good. David looks like he has something he wants to say there.
Well, no, it was when we first logged on to do this chat, and you sort of sat there intently and said, "Why is my dad messaging me?" And I had to think for a moment. Now, is Robert's dad still alive? What's going on here?
That would have been quite effective today,
But
wouldn't it?
yeah, let's try it. Meet again on Halloween.
So look, all it remains at this point is to thank my lovely colleagues tonight. So thanks, Ben, for putting up with yet another one of my suggestions that you didn't like.
Thank you. I didn't say I didn't like
He
it.
loved it. He bloody loved it. I could tell he was holding back with his enthusiasm.
It's all right. He's more enthusiastic about that than he was about Casino Royale, so it's fine. And thank you, David, for joining us for your second time in a week. For one of my records. You're now part of the Cinepunk family officially, I think.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll have you back on again at some point. And I know we've been talking on and off for a while about doing some stuff with David on some other topics, and possibly over in his neck of the woods as well. So we'll see what happens in due course. But yeah, welcome to the fold.
Thank you.
And it's been lovely to work with you again on our favourite kind of genre.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, for those of you at home who've sat and watched this or listened in, depending on which format you're on, thank you very much. If you enjoyed it, communicate with us on social media. You will get us on Twitter and also on Facebook. We're at Cinepunked. You get us on Instagram at CinepunkedFilm, and our website is cinepunkt.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, give it a download, tell your friends, and you can subscribe via any of your favourite podcast providers. You also get the back catalogue over on our website as well. We'll be back again in your ears very, very soon, and possibly also your eyes. These are the joys of the 21st century and lockdown forcing us all to do video communication technology, so now you get to reap the rewards of that. Until the next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.